A year ago, a historic winter storm struck Texas, leaving 4 million people freezing in their homes without power. More than 200 died. Here in Austin, the city's electric utility was forced to cut power to more than 200,000 customers to help save the state power grid from catastrophic failure. Tonight, our exclusive sit-down with Austin Energy's general manager about the steps that utility has taken to prepare for the next emergency and why, if you were one of the lucky ones who kept your power on in 2021, you shouldn't count on that in the next crisis. Here's senior reporter Tony Plohetski.
Just a reminder that the city's power system is linked to the state power grid operated by the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. Austin Energy had no choice but to respond to ERCOT's demands to dump power from the overall system. Still, Austin Energy officials acknowledge there are improvements to make for the future.
You know, Tony, we have taken everything that we've learned from the very harrowing event of last February, and we comprised a after-action report where we looked at everything across our operations, and we came up with, I believe it was 19 observations and 112 follow-up action items, and I'm happy to say that we're over 55% complete with those action items. But with any event, there are things that you can always do better, and so we've worked hard to make sure that we're in a better position.
I know that at the height of this emergency, a lot of people were looking at a fully lit downtown Austin and saying, you know, how can that be? What is going on here? We've got empty, you know, tall buildings that are fully lit.
You know, that was an area of great frustration in trying to get connected with the building owners and managers, the occupants of those buildings, to get them to reduce the consumption that they had, turn off their lights and any unnecessary equipment to help us during this very extreme event. So we have been actively reaching out. We have folks in a group called Key Accounts, and they are talking to those building owners, the people that manage them and operate them, and the occupants, to say, we're going to need your help, and it's going to require that you reduce your consumption during an energy emergency.
Would you say that is in fact one of the main things that you all have done over the past year in terms of further preparing the city should something like this happen again?
You know, we've looked at our circuits and we've looked at ways that we can get more capacity into the load shed program. There are things you can do like reconfigure circuits, so you can look at where's a critical load customer and are you able to move them onto a circuit with fewer customers and giving you a larger circuit, you know, more megawatts of power to be able to cut. So we've identified 3 of those circuits and we're working toward moving those critical loads. There's been a lot of talk about circuit sectionalization, and circuit sectionalization is when you take a circuit and you break it into segments, and you do that by installing a sectionalizer, which is basically a motor-operated switch. And in the event of an energy emergency, we can open that switch and shut off power to the customers downstream of the critical load, but keep the critical load energized, which would be very important during an emergency.
It's almost like a tourniquet, it sounds like.
Well, I guess you could think of it that way.
So you raise a very important point, I think, for residents and homeowners, which is just because you kept your power in February 2021 during the rolling blackouts or the blackouts does not necessarily mean that if the exact same situation were to unfold today, that you would necessarily retain your power, right?
Well, what we would look at is what is the demand of reduction power cuts that we're required to do. And so if we get to a situation where we're sectionalizing circuits to protect critical load, those downstream customers would be without power. And so yes, I would say that it doesn't necessarily mean that if you had power in this last time that in an extreme emergency that your power would stay on. You know, making sure that we can sustain supporting our team members when they're having to work in hazardous conditions or be on site, and making sure that we have adequate supplies for them is important. We found that when people have to be out in extreme conditions and it's, you know, snow and ice and wet and sleet and different things, their feet get wet. So being able to support them and have ways for them to have alternate pairs of boots and extra dry socks, things like that, I think are really important. There are so many things that we have really worked on, and I think our after action report does a really good job of laying those out. It includes the time frames that we're targeting for completion of those items, and overall I think that we are going to be better prepared going forward.
Hoping that something like this never happens again.
Well, you know, hope isn't really a strategy. And I can assure you that we are going to do everything possible to make sure that we can support our customers to the best of our ability.
In addition to those steps, Sargent says Austin Energy also has done more outreach to medically vulnerable customers to make sure they have a place to go if the power goes off. And she said they have made sure that they have even more ways and in more languages to distribute public emergency alerts. For the KVUE Defenders, Tony Plohetski, KVUE News.
Tony, thanks. As we all know, the power emergency last year became a water emergency in Austin. Tomorrow on KVUE News at 6, we'll talk to the head of Austin Water about new efforts the utility has taken to make sure it's prepared for another major winter storm.